Hello everyone, welcome to my Exosister Handtrap guide. I got a request to do this, so we're doing it. So I've got, I believe, 12 hand traps to talk about, roughly, because I think they're the most relevant hand traps in the game, and I'll go through them as I do. First off, we have the ones that I think do literally nothing to Exosister, and those are Bestials / DD Crow and Meowls, which I don't have in front of me. I didn't want to look for it. But these two do nothing to you. Bestials, if your opponent Bestials you, one of your Exosister monsters, you would probably win the game because this triggers all of your Exosisters, so they're actively benefiting your game plan. All this does is put a body on their field and potentially makes them lose the game instantly because you get to summon 2 Exosister Ixies for free. And then Meowls, you don't move anything from your Banish or Grave onto the field. You're never summoning from the Banish or Grave, so card doesn't do anything to you. They're just hand looping themselves. So yeah, neither are very good against you. Onto the cards that do matter. I'm going to probably do them in order of importance. First is Bell. You'd think Bell would also be useless against this deck, but it has exactly one use case against this deck. On your turn, after you've set up combo, your opponent can Bell Returnia, because Returnia can target a card on your opponent controls or in their grave. And because it can banish a card in their grave, Bell can negate it. So keep in mind, Bell isn't useless in this matchup. You can Bell the trap, and then that shuts off a lot of interaction potentially, because this also shuts off the effect to Ixies or banish another card on your opponent's turn, which means you won't be able to potentially make another Magnifica, and then, because Magnifica's effects aren't hard once per turn, so you could theoretically use Magnifica's effects twice each turn, which gives you like 4 interruptions where you only would have had 2. Next we have the, I guess this is the one I'd say is the next worst, probably Dominus Purge. This card's not bad, it's just a worse Ash Blossom, but importantly, it can't negate Martha. So really you're only able to use this to negate the Exosister Michaelis, or like Betrayal's pretty good. Negating Betrayal's pretty strong. In fact, you could argue this is better than like the target negate cards. Speaking of which, so let's say, and this is how, I'm going to be honest, that you're going to be playing through most low impact hand traps pretty much the same way, which it's going to be, let's say you open Martha plus any card that gets you another extender, or like either a Cheeky Saurihime. So it can be a Cheeky Saurihime, or Tachyon, or Pax, or Betrayal. All these cards are crazy if you open them with an Exosister. So we're going to start by going Martha. And actually, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to have a target negate card. I'll just put up the best one, Imperm. And I'll have an Ash up here too. So we're going to start with Martha. So let's say our opponent ashes Martha. Well, if we've got any of these cards in our hand, what we can now do is we can go normal summon Martha. Well, okay, so it depends on the name. If we have a Cheeky Saurihime, for example, we can normal summon Martha, and then use a Cheeky Saurihime to extra normal. That on summon will search. If our opponent then uses a second hand trap, something like a Purge or an Imperm, to negate Ichiki Saurihime, they probably have just lost the game, because then we can go into Michaelis, and then Michaelis can search Betrayal, which can Betrayal can then get you into Ellis, or actually not even Ellis. You're getting it would be Ellis and Stella. And then you're going to be able to normal Stella. Stella can summon the Ellis. And then we can Ixies for, actually, okay, so it depends. Actually, there are reasons to do this differently. So you can either get Stella Ellis. This plays around your opponent having a third hand trap. So if they have like an Imperm or something, if they've already used an Imperm or a Purge, and then your opponent has another Imperm, they could Imperm the Stella. If you choose to get Sophia for the draw one, they could choose to Imperm the Stella, and then you would not be able to extend from there. If you choose to get Stella Ellis, you can go, in fact, you don't even have to use your normal, you can go Effective Ellis to summon itself, and then Betrayal target Ellis to extra normal. Or you could even go normal Stella, Stella effect to summon the Ellis from hand, and then if your opponent imperms the Stella, you can then extend with either Ellis or Betrayal to get the Ellis onto field. So you have a bunch of ways to extend from this position. So we're just gonna say though that we resolve the Stella because it's not super likely our opponent's gonna have 3 of the same style of hand trap. And then we're going to Xyz for Carmael. Carmael will then set in the end phase. And then from here you Xyz for Magnifica. So this, we have played through 2 hand traps, theoretically. If our opponent hand traps us incorrectly, because they hand trapped us correctly before, I do think ashing Martha is correct. But I think you are throwing if you choose to ash the... I just realized I started my turn by normaling Martha, so you would have to do it by summoning Ellis and then using Betrayal to summon Stella. My bad. But yes, the you can play through 2 of these pretty easily if you open 2 engine pieces and your opponent doesn't know what you're doing. If your opponent does know what you're doing and you go, they ash Martha, you normal Martha, you summon a Cheeky Sorahime, and then they don't imperm a Cheeky Sorahime, it does make your turn a little worse. You're going to be searching Ellis, and then Ellis can special summon itself. Or you can add... Never mind. Nope, that's it. I was going to say you could add Sophia, but that doesn't really do what you want. From here, you can then go Xyz with these 2. We don't have Betrayal on field. Xyz with these 2 to make... okay, so you actually have 2 lines here. If you think your opponent has a second hand trap, you can Xyz these 2 together to make Carmael. And then Carmael will, in end phase, set a card. If your opponent tries to interact with Carmael, you'll be able to negate their effect with Carmael's effect, and then still get your trap card. So you can get something like a Vadis if you think your opponent's going to be moving stuff out of the grave, or you can get a Returnia for the banish. And then in end phase, the Cheeky Sorahime will bounce itself back to hand, and you'll be able to use it on the next turn to get combo. If you don't think your opponent has another hand trap, you can go Xyz with... probably these 2, because this one's a little better, to make Michaelis, and then you can go Michaelis effect. I'm actually lying. No, you should use, you should keep the Ellis for betrayal reasons. You're going to make Michaelis, and then Michaelis will detach a material to search out a copy of Betrayal, and then Betrayal will search out your Stella and your Ellis. You'll then be able to use Betrayal to extra normal the Stella, and Stella can summon Sophia. Sophia will draw you a card, and then you can turn 2 of these into another Xyz monster. So we can then make our copy of Exosister Carmael, and then Carmael will set in the end phase, and then we can Xyz these 2 to make Magnifica. So this gets you pretty much the full board. The only thing you don't have is Returnia, but that's fine. Notably, you also have Betrayal up, which is really, really powerful. But yeah, that's the basic line. And then what happens if you open any of these other cards? Well, it's a lot better. So if you open, let's say, 7th Tachyon doesn't change much. You're usually just going to use it to get a Cheeky Sorahime in that situation. But Pax or Betrayal allow you to play through a lot more. So... let's say you go Martha, they ash it, and then you go normal Martha, or actually no, you go Betrayal next. Betrayal allows you to then search 2, discard 1. So I'm going to assume we have another card in our hand to discard. So we're going to get Stella, and we're going to get Ellis. We're then going to we're then going to normal the Stella. Stella's then going to summon our copy of Martha from the hand. And then Betrayal will let us extra normal the Ellis from the hand. We'll then be able to Xyz 2 for our copy of either Michaelis, if you want to search Pax to get your next extender, or you can Xyz for Caspitel to search your other extender, because we're going to be searching another copy of Ellis. I'm going to be searching another copy of Ellis. Although notably, if you want to keep your second copy of Ellis in the deck, because you want to keep as many Ellises in as possible, you're going to make Michaelis, and then Michaelis can search your Pax, and then Pax can summon from the deck a second copy of Stella to the field, which will allow you to then Xyz into the Carmael, and then Carmael will play through whatever else, and you can make your Magnifica and end on your full board that way. Now, if your opponent has another hand trap, let's say they have an impermanent ash, and they choose to ash your... I put the Betrayal away. No, I didn't. It's right here. If they choose to ash your... I did put Martha away, though. your Martha, and then you go Betrayal, and you use Betrayal to search Ellis and Stella, and then we normal Stella, and they imperm the Stella. What we can then do from there is Betrayal to summon our Ellis from the hand. We can go Ellis Effect to summon itself from hand, and then we can go Betrayal, target... No, I'm right. I'm literally right. We go Betrayal, target Ellis, or target Stella to summon Ellis from hand, and then we get to Michaelis that way. And then we are able to go Michaelis, get... No, never mind. We're going to go Carmael here. So if they imperm the Stella after that, we can then just make Carmael, and then Carmael will net us a card in end phase. And even if they have another trap, we'll still get this card, and we'll be able to... oh no, we aren't able to Carmael. I'm literally lying. You will. You'll be able to, since you discarded a card off the Betrayal, you'll be able to add something back, so Carmael will be live. And yes, you will also have the trap set. So you'll have a trap plus Carmael, which can trigger something like a Vadis, which is really good. Betrayal will also be on field, which can also trigger Vadis. So even if you have to use the Carmael, you still have a way to trigger Vadis on your opponent's turn. And then if your opponent were to let you resolve Stella, summon the Martha, and then Betrayal, summon Ellis. I don't remember if that's how we did it last time. I'm going to assume it is. There's so many ways to summon monsters in this deck that the niches of it end up not really mattering in the end, most of the time. We can then go into Michaelis, and then if our opponent imperms us here, we don't really care. Because we have Betrayal, I mean, we care, obviously. We don't get to do as much, but it's not nearly that bad because we get to go on our opponent's turn Betrayal with the Ellis to then rank it up into something else. The only downside is if our opponent normal summons a monster and then goes battle phase, they can just run over the Ellis, but it means we aren't going to die and we get another turn to play the game, which isn't bad. So this is like the worst case scenario, is if they... choose to imperm this, and then you only have that. And Pax gets you to the same thing, because Pax gets you to Betrayal. So it doesn't really matter that way. It just means you have to do your lines slightly differently, because you don't have access to Pax. So that's all the low impact hand traps. You actually play through these really well. Basically, for as many cards as you have in your hand, you'll be able to play through more low impact hand traps than you would be able to otherwise. Even your some of your lower impact extenders like Stella can still get you there, since you can go normal Stella, summon Martha from hand, and that still goes combo. Especially because you haven't used Betrayal yet. Now on to the high impact hand traps. So we've got cards like, I'll start with Nibiru and Droll, and then I'll move on to the Mulch armies that do matter. Those being Peruia and Fua. So Droll and Nib, assuming your opponent only has these two, is a little rough, or it can be rough, depending on what you start with. So let's say you start with Martha, just Martha. You're going to go Martha effect to summon. It's going to summon the Ellis, and then you're going to Ixies for Michaelis, and then Michaelis is going to detach, and you're going to search Pax. Now, if your opponent drolls you here, which they should, obviously, you just kind of fire droll when you can now chain Pax in order to then search a copy of either Vadis or Returnia. So these, depending on what your opponent's playing, these could vary in power. Returnia is better if you know your opponent won't be moving anything out of the grave, because you don't have a way to do it on your own. But if you don't think, if you think your opponent will trigger Vadis, you can just get Vadis, and then this is a lot more interaction on your opponent's turn. So Droll really isn't that bad for this deck to deal with, and it gets a lot easier depending on what you have as well. So let's say you start with Betrayal, and you go Betrayal, search Martha and Stella, and then you'll discard a card. You can then go, they then Droll you on resolution of that. That's fine. You then go Martha effect, summon, and then you'll summon Ellis, and then you go Betrayal to summon the Stella from hand. And then you can then Ixies from here into Carmael. And what's cool about this is this also beats Imperm. If your opponent has Imperm here, they try to Imperm Carmael here, you can just, I guess, yeah, because you discarded a card for Betrayal. So you'll have a card engraved for the Carmael, so you'll be able to just chain Carmael, have them add a card back, and that will trigger Stella's effect. So you then get to make any of your Xyz monsters. It just depends on what you want to be able to tag out into on your opponent's turn. This format, I think going in blind, it's not bad to go into a Sophiel, but obviously it's the safest pick to go into Michaelis. You won't be able to use the effect because you're under Droll, but you will be able to do everything else, so then you'll then be able to Xyz into Magnifica, and then you'll be ending on one of the traps as well. So you're ending on a really powerful board through 2 hand traps, all with the 1 Betrayal, which is crazy. That's why this card's so so powerful. Droll's really not good against this deck, because you just don't care most of the time. Even at the worst, this deck still gets to set up some amount of interaction, so Droll really isn't fantastic. Nib, on the other hand, it can be spooky. So your 1-card combo does not beat Nibiru. If they wait too long, you will be able to make Carmael, and by then you'll be able to get multiple interactions onto the board. But if they don't wait and they just hit you there, I think the only thing you end up being able to do is have Betrayal on your opponent's turn, which obviously isn't enough. So we need to have Martha and one of our other extenders. It can be Stella. It can be... actually, it cannot be Stella. Stella is not good enough. It has to be some combination of Pax, Betrayal, and Martha. It has to be some combination of these 3, because these are the ones that get you multiple Exosister monsters off of your singular cards. Martha gets you 2, Betrayal gets you 2, because you need to be able to make an early Carmael, and then make Michaelis and go off from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Betrayal and Martha, because they basically do the same thing. We're going to go Martha effect to summon Ellis from deck. We're then going to go Betrayal to search out our or I guess, you'd probably do this first. You'd probably go Xyz first into Carmael. No, because you want to be able to beat Imperm. So no, you go Betrayal first, because otherwise you won't have a card engraved. So you can go Betrayal. You're going to search out Stella and Ellis. You're then going to discard a card. You're then going to Xyz for Carmael here. From here, you're going to trigger Carmael, and then Carmael is going to allow you to set an end phase. So immediately you're already going to have Vadis Betrayal set up, which is really good, even if you get nibbed. But we're then going to go normal. We're then going to go Ellis effect to summon itself. We're then going to use Betrayal to extra normal to get Stella. We're then going to Xyz with these 2 to make Michaelis. We're then going to go Michaelis effect to detach and search out our copy of Exosister. Probably getting... we're going to get whichever trap. We aren't going to set with the Carmael, so we're going to get Vadis or Returnia. And then Carmael will be setting the other one. If your opponent nibs you tries to nib you before you get here, you'll have a card engraved because you discarded with Betrayal. You can just negate with Carmael, and that's even good for you because then they're going to trigger both of your monsters. If they try to nib you on the summon of Michaelis, you can trigger Carmael. It's just not as good because it doesn't trigger all your Exosisters. But now, if you want to go a little further, you want to be a little greedier, you can Xyz from here into Magnifica, and then Magnifica can... and now Magnifica is weak to your opponent, nibbing you here, but it really doesn't matter because you have Returnia, Vadis, Betrayal. Those all kind of get you where you need to get to. You don't really care about the nib from here. You're losing out on your 2 interruptions you would get off of the Magnifica, and you're losing on the security you would get. The biggest thing is if your opponent... there is actually a real downside here. I am underplaying something. You do get given a nib token, which is really, really annoying because it means you aren't able to use Returnia. So you are left with just Betrayal Vadis. If you want to play around nib as best as possible, one, you could just not make Magnifica and then you'd always have the Carmael, so you don't really care. But also, you could, instead of getting Returnia, get Pax, and then the Pax could be set and used as a 3rd Exosister you can summon on your opponent's turn to then give you 3 Exosister summons once you use Betrayal or your opponent moves something of their own free will. So This is still really powerful. Like, being able to trigger 3 Exosisters is insane, and especially into a deck like Draco Tail, where you can make Sophiel and completely lock them out of the graveyard. A deck like Yummy, where you can make Caspatel, completely lock them out of summoning from the graveyard. There are matchups that are going to be rough. Radiant Typhoon is a nightmare for this board to deal with. But again, also a lot of people aren't running Nib this format, and it is probably the single hand trap that is the most powerful against this deck, realistically, on its own. Yeah. But this deck at least has a counterplay to Nib now. It really just depends on if you want to put your opponent, if you hard call your opponent having it. If you really think they have it, you can just end on Michaelis, Carmael, both traps, and Betrayal. And that is still a really good board. You'll be able to trigger Vot. You'll be able to Votis. You have Carmael negate. You have a lot. You still have a lot of interaction there. You're really just gaining the non-targeting banish from Magnifica. So I think there is a very real argument to just end your turn there, if you really think they have Nibiru. Now, there is one card I didn't talk about, which is Impulse. Impulse is actually pretty lackluster against this deck. The reason why is that as long as you keep in mind you should Martha on an empty board, they can't Impulse Martha. So as long as you're making sure you do it on an empty board, your opponent won't be able to Impulse here. They can't Impulse Ichiki Saruhime. They can only really Impulse the Stella effect on field and the Ellis effect in hand, which 90% of the time is not important, because if you search Ellis and Stella, negating one of them doesn't matter. They both can get themselves out of the hand, or Stella can get the Ellis out of your hand, and Ellis gets itself out of hand, so it doesn't do anything. The realistic best way to use Impulse against this deck is to Impulse Votis, which is a lot harder to deal with, or to Impulse the Magnifica effect to tag out. That's where Impulse really shines in this matchup. But if they just fire it on one of your guys trying to stop you from playing, it doesn't do anything. So on your turn, you don't really have to worry about Impulse. Impulse is much better as a board breaker against this deck. Finally, we're going to talk about Fualos and Peruia, the cards a lot of people are always scared of when they're trying to do combos. This deck plays, I think, all right into both of these. You should really only be needing to give your opponent like a couple draws off of each. If we start with Martha, for example, and our opponent hits us with Fualos, we're going to be able to activate, we're going to, like, let's say we go Martha and our opponent Fuas us. We summon Martha, we summon Ellis. If we have an extender that allows us to play without using Martha, we always do that if we get Fuad and like draw or standby, which is good. So we're going to go ahead and go, so we've given our opponent one draw. We're then going to Xyz for the copy of Michaelis. Michaelis is then going to detach in order to search. This gives them 2 draws. We're then going to detach to search Betrayal, and then Betrayal is going to search Stella Ellis, discard a card. We're then going to summon, and then use Betrayal to summon, and then we're going to Xyz for a copy of Carmael, and then we are ending our turn here. The reason we're not just going immediately into Carmael is because, one, you really want the Betrayal in case your opponent has a removal option for the Carmael or has a way to stop you from resolving Carmael. But also, unfortunately, and this only matters if you started with exactly Martha, you don't have a card in grave. So I also didn't detach a material from Michaelis. You don't have a card in grave for the Carmael, so it doesn't do anything unless you use Votis really early. You can't like chain it to your opponent using an effect, which isn't terrible. You could do that if you wanted to give them one less draw. You could go ahead and go immediately into Carmael, set Votis at end phase, and then if your opponent has a and then at the start of their turn, you're going to Votis, and then Votis summon 2 names, and then that puts a card in grave for Carmael, so Carmael can resolve, and it will be able to trigger the Exo names. So it's not bad. It really just depends on how much you value that extra draw. I think getting the Betrayal is really important, but it depends. It's totally up to personal preference on how much you decide to give them, how many draws you decide to give them. Depends on the matchup, depends on a lot of things. Then we have, actually, I do want to also show what happens if you open, let's say, a way to Martha that isn't not even a way to Martha, this isn't bad. Just betrayal, actually. Let's do betrayal. If they fool you and draw, and you go betrayal, you can then go betrayal, get Martha and Ellis, and then if your opponent foos you, actually, really funny thing here. If your opponent foos you early, it's actually better for them because let's say we get these two, we discard a card. We then go Martha effect to summon itself. Or summon itself and Ellis from deck. Our opponent fuas. We now summon the Ellis and the Martha. New chain, betrayal gets to trigger, making them banish Fualos. That triggers both of our Exosister names to then summon Carmael and Michaelis for free. This does give them 3 draws, but also we now have so much more we get to do with just this one card. Carmael triggers and it's live because we discarded a card. Michaelis can use its effect to get Returnia. So we're giving them 3 draws, but we're ending on our full board other than Magnifica, which is insane. It's a lot through 1 Fualos considering we got it all with 1 Martha. Or I guess 1 betrayal. We also get to summon Ellis, which is another interruption on top of it. So really, really scary stuff if they end up doing that. If they don't end up doing that and they just do it and draw, so we know they have it, we can instead go normal Martha, effective Ellis to summon, and then Ixies for Carmael. And then Carmael effect, and then we pass here. This gives us the Carmael set, which gives us Vadis. And then we also have Carmael effect, which can add a card back, and then that'll allow us to chain Vadis to the Carmael. So if they try to interact with us, it doesn't matter. And then the betrayal can also trigger to make them banish a thing, which we can also chain to Vadis to get our 2 Exos to Xyz summon. So it's still really strong, and this only gives them 1 draw, which is insane. This is probably the best case scenario for you, unless you have extra cards in hand that allow you to also just play through it really easily. The scariest hand trap for this deck very well might be Peruia, but it's hard to say. I mean, it's either that or Nibiru. The reason Peruia is so rough is that it pairs so well with every other hand trap you can play with this deck. So let's say our opponent draw phase Peruias us. Put it in the actual grave. And then we'll then have to go Martha, effect to summon Ellis from deck. And from here, we can go Ixies for Carmael. And then Carmael will set Vadis and end phase. That's basically what you're going to do. What sucks here is that this loses to a lot of hand traps. If your opponent has any way to interact with the Carmael or force the Carmael effect, you won't get to use Vadis to get your guys out, which means you're entirely reliant on your opponent doing so. You still have to give your opponent a draw with this, so it's not even you're giving your opponent 0 draws. And if your opponent has Ash for Martha, you're put into a position where if every extender in your deck, other than exactly Ellis, if you have, not Ellis, sorry, exactly Pax. If you have like Pax plus an Exo, that's the only way to summon an Exo from deck without Martha. So you're gonna have to give them 2 draws minimum just to end on this board with the Carmael and the Vadis set, which is really rough. I do think Peruia is probably the hardest hand trap for this deck to play through. So if you want a card that beats this deck, Peruia and Nib are your 2 go-tos for sure. They are, I think, the 2 strongest hand traps against this deck. Fu is also really solid, and this is how you play through them. So I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you got what you wanted out of it. I think I was very cluttered during this video, which is, not ideal. But I hope this was helpful. If you guys are interested in these, I might do more of these in the future. Or maybe like dedicated combo videos would also be nice. I don't know. Just tell me what you guys want. Also, thank you guys for 100 subscribers. I just got those. I just got my last one, I believe yesterday, and it's really nice to see. I'm really happy to hit like my first big milestone, I guess you could say. So I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.